It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of July 21st, 1995. We got 4 movies to look at today, so let's just get on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, the teen comedy classic, Clueless.
So, okay, like right now, for example, the Haitians need to come to America. But some people are all, what about the strain on our resources? And it's like, when I had this garden party for my father's birthday, right? People came that, did not RSVP. So I was, totally bugging. I had to haul ass to the kitchen, squish in extra place settings, and, people were on mismatched chairs and all. But by the end of the day, it was the more the merrier. And so, if the government could just get to the kitchen, rearrange some things, we could certainly party with the Haitians.
Wow. You guys talk like grown-ups.
Oh, well, this is a really good school.
Mr. Hall was way harsh. He gave me a C minus.
Well, he gave me a C, which drags down my entire average.
Hello? There was a stop sign?
I totally paused. You try driving in platforms.
Oh, should I write them a note?
Ew! Get off of me!
As if. Cher's got attitude about high school boys.
It's a personal choice every woman has got to make for themselves.
Cher's saving herself for Luke Perry.
Cher, you're a virgin? I mean, I'm not prude. I'm just highly selective. I mean, you see how picky I am about my shoes, and they only go on my feet.
Nice stems.
Thanks.
What the hell is that?
Well, dress.
Says who?
Calvin Klein.
What are you doing? Yo, you get on the freeway! Get on the
You go, girl.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. Whatever. Did I miss something? This big hair back?
Amber, my plastic surgeon doesn't want me doing any activity where balls fly at my nose.
Well, there goes your social life.
I'm gonna be a supermodel.
So, Clueless is a modern day version of Jane Austen's classic novel Emma, which has actually been previously adapted in 2 movies that actually came out after this one, the 96 one with Gwyneth Paltrow, and then we recently had the one in 2020 with Anya Taylor-Joy that came out just before the pandemic. But when it comes to Clueless, I think everyone can agree this is one of the best teen films of all time, one of the best teen comedies of all time, and you got Amy Heckerling, whose career started with a teen comedy, and that was, of course, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, another classic movie, so it's fitting that movie fits the time of the 80s, and this one fits the perfect time for the 90s, because this came out right in the middle of the 1990s, and this is kind of what everybody thought, Beverly Hills High Society was like for for the high schoolers back then. I mean, we've had movies and TV shows that do this kind of stuff, like Beverly Hills 90210, of course, and then, of course, we got the Beverly Hillbillies movie, which some people may say is not a good movie. I still stand by that. It is still a funny movie, but this is definitely a movie that really defined 1990s Beverly Hills culture, and it's just a fun movie. I mean, the casting in this movie is great. Alicia Silverstone, who plays the leading girl in this, Cher Horowitz, is very good in this movie. This is a great film that launched her into superstardom, and actually got her a $10 million multi-film deal with Columbia Pictures that actually came after this. But that didn't last too long, because the next movie that she did after that was the first movie she did from that was Excessive Baggage, which was not a very good movie and really panned at the box office and kind of killed that pretty quickly. But she fits this role really well. She is very good in this movie. She plays a very likable character in here. In fact, everybody in this movie is really damn good. You see a lot of notable names getting their starts in this movie. Stacey Dash, of course, Brittany Murphy's in there, Paul Rudd, Donald Faison, Elisa Donovan, Breckin Meyer, Jeremy Sisto. You also have Dan Hedaya, Wallace Shawn, Twink Kaplan, Julie Brown is in this. Just a lot of notable names in here. And it is a really funny movie. Even though it is very dated for the 1990s, you can still watch it over 25 years later and still get a good chunk of laughs out of it, because it just has that appeal that just can make it last. You can go back to it, have a good laugh at what we thought the '90s, what we think the '90s were like, and you could still really find a lot of funny moments in here. This movie is still really funny after all these years, and it has a long legacy to it. I mean, it has a lasting legacy to it. I mean, we saw a Super Bowl commercial this year where Alicia Silverstone reprised her role, and I mean, it was a fun commercial too. Like, it was this movie really does hold up after all these years. The TV show that came out after that, not so much. I hardly remember it. I know it ran for a couple of seasons, so it did. It did run for a couple of seasons, but it didn't really have that same legacy like the movie does. I mean, the movie still holds up after all these years. It's still a funny movie. It's still an amazing film. It's one of Amy Heckerling's best movies, and I don't think I can need to say anything more about it. Clueless is just a fantastic film, so if you still haven't seen it, do yourself a favor, man, and watch it, because it is still a funny movie after all these years, so. With that said, let us move on to the next movie, and we get to one of the most interesting movies in my lifetime, and that is Free Willy 2, The Adventure Home. And you're probably thinking, why is that movie interesting to me? So, why did I say so? But, why is that movie interesting to me? Well, I'm gonna tell you after this.
The adventure is back. The fun is back.
It's Willy! It's Willy!
Willy's back. And this time, he's brought the whole family to meet an old friend.
Look at the size of that one! That's Cat's paw! Willy's mother!
Willie's mom. Found her. Do you think he misses me?
I know he does. Now,
Hi, Randolph.
Weren't you gonna introduce me?
no, there's a new friend in Jesse's life.
Yeah!
A nightmare brother named Elvis.
Traitor. Girls are the enemy. You are the enemy.
Oh my gosh.
He's gonna eat him, isn't he?
I can't believe he let you do that.
A new challenge
Oh, no.
in his future.
A 40-year-old Liberian oil tanker ran aground on Lawson Reef. If they swim out of the cove, they're going to swim right into the oil. They die.
They're trapped in the cove. They can't get back to their family. I don't know what we can do. I do. Come on, Roy! They're coming after us!
And a whole new adventure
Yes, again.
about to begin.
Come on, Willy, this way!
There's a small pleasure craft trapped in the fire.
All right, Willy.
Free Willy 2, The Adventure Home.
So we finally come to one of the earliest influences of me and movies in my life, because when I was 6 years old, I went to go see this movie. We used to have a big movie theater around in Monroeville. There was actually two of them, actually. There was Showcase Cinemas, which is further down the road from where the mall is at, but it closed down in the mid-2000s, and now if you go over there, there's a Sheetz and a hotel there. But there was another movie theater up at the top of the hill right next to the mall where I go to Best Buy all the time, and there used to be like a 4-film theater there, and that closed in the early 90s. But the one I went to see this one in was the Showcase Cinemas, and I still have those images of that old movie theater I used to go to. I mean, it takes me back whenever I think about this story. But basically, this was my first movie that I ever saw in the theater when I was 6 years old. I mean, I used to watch a lot of Disney movies on videotape. And a lot of Warner Brothers movies too. But this is, as far as I know, the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater when I was 6 years old. And I remember my 6-year-old self coming out of that movie and thinking to myself, wow, this movie was not very good. This was not this. I mean, my first movie on the big screen, and my first thought was, this is a terrible movie. And needless to say, the years have gone by, and I've looked back on this movie, and yeah, my thoughts really haven't changed on this movie. This movie is not very good. This is not a very good movie whatsoever, even though there are a lot of ideas here that I think could have worked. Like, I think the idea of seeing Willy with his family this time around, I thought that was a fun aspect that could be played around, but in the end, it just falls under the typical sequel territory. Like, we got to do the same thing over again, and this time we got to do it bigger and better, because now instead of Willy jumping over the kid to get over to the free water. Now we have to have Jesse grown up now with Willy and these other two kids, including his half brother. Now they have to go face off these cartoonish bad guys. Like, it's in the years since I realized that the Free Willy cartoon had a really cartoonishly bad guy, but in that show, but these guys aren't that bad, but they come pretty close. But not only do we have to stop them, but we have to stop it. But we have to have a huge fire explosion in the end, and have to get the whales and everybody else out of here, out of this fiery mess that's going on right now. It's just like we got to go bigger and better, and they went bigger, but they certainly didn't go better. I mean, it also doesn't help that there's not really a whole lot of intrigue with this movie. I mean, the kid in this movie, Jason James Richter, I mean, he got a huge payday for this movie. I think they said that he had to renegotiate his contracts to go from the $150,000 he made on the first film to $1.5 million on this one, with the option for a third sequel. And I mean, God bless him. He's trying his best in this movie to keep it going. Everybody in here, they are trying the best that they can, but there's just nothing really all that interesting about it. There's nothing all that surprising about it, and it's just like there's so much here that could have been done with this movie, and you guys didn't do anything with it. You just went bigger because the first movie was a success. It's coming out this summer, so we got to go even bigger than what we did before, and it just didn't work. It's just a movie that there was so much potential there that really could have made it more interesting, but. And I think what also doesn't work either is that this is the first time that the whale that this whale will be fully animatronic. So they had to. So this is something that you really have to get right on screen to have the effect work, and they really do not. I mean, what made the first movie work the first time is that the whale looked like a real whale, but in this movie, there are times when it just looks too fake at times. Like especially in the climax. You could tell that it's an animatronic whale, and the tension and the intensity of the scenes here don't have that same impact when you realize the whale looks fake. Like, it looks fake at times, and the environmental message of the film really doesn't work either. I just didn't think the movie worked. I didn't think the movie worked back then, and all these years later, I've seen a lot worse movies than the first time I saw this movie, but, okay, you know what? I'm being a little too harsh. It's not a horrible, horrible movie, but like I said, I've seen a whole lot worse, but it's still not a good movie, especially compared to the first movie, which I thought worked fine for what it did, but as these movies kept coming out, they kept getting worse and worse, and I'll give it this. It's certainly a lot better than the last two Free Willy films that came out. The third one that went to theaters, and then the fourth one with Steve Irwin's daughter in it. I can't remember the name of it, but I know that Steve Irwin's daughter, Bindi Irwin, was in it. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I gotta say about this one. It's a movie that I really do not like, but at the same time, it still does have kind of an emotional place in my heart because it was the first movie I went to go see on a big screen in theater, and I would see more and more movies after this one, and yeah, like. As much as I don't like this movie, this still holds kind of a nostalgic place in my heart because of the fact that this was the first movie I saw on a big screen. And in a way, that kind of makes it all worth it in the end a little bit. Like, I may have not liked the movie, but little did I know that over 25 years later, I'd still be reviewing movies and seeing them on a big screen, largely because this was the one that started it all. So, take what you get from that one, I guess. So, yeah, Free Willy 2, The Adventure Home. So, on that note, let us move on to the next movie, and that is the controversial Kids.
Spoiled children soon to fall. Freedom is the lie we live. No one cries aloud, waiting for the fire.
So let's talk about that controversy behind Kids. This was a movie that, on its release, was considered controversial, mostly because of the subject matter in here. You have a bunch of these kids who are characterized in the movie as hedonists who engage in sexual acts and substance abuse, and these kids are pre-teenagers pretty much, and yeah, you got to be really careful. Obviously, you got to be really careful with that kind of stuff. And so what ended up happening was that Harvey Weinstein, who was the head of Miramax at the time, of course, was wary of parent company Disney's opinion on the risky screenplay, and they decided to involve Disney in funding the production of the film. After they showed the final cut of the film, Miramax eventually paid $3.5 million for the distribution rights to the film. However, Miramax was owned by Disney, like I said before, and they were forced to buy back the film from Disney and created this one-off company called Shining Excalibur because of Disney's policy that they had that they would not put out movies that are NC-17. And they appealed this to the MPAA to lower it to R, which didn't work. So they ended up releasing this film as an unrated film, and so they put a lot of money into this to get this film out there because of Disney's policy that they had back then. And truth be told, it actually did kind of work because the film was very talked about, and it was considered to be a very risky film that actually kind of paid off. It got people to see the film. It actually was a decent-sized hit, bringing in $20 million off of that $1.5 million budget that it had, and $7.5 million of that coming from North America. But when you look at the film itself, it's a very uncomfortable movie, but it's a film that really is trying to test the limits of how far it could go, because some of it may consider it exploitive, and some people have considered it to be child pornography in a way. But you have people like Roger Ebert who said that Kids is the kind of movie that needs to be talked about afterwards. It doesn't tell us what it means. Sure, it has a message involving safe sex, but safe sex is not going to civilize these kids, make them into curious, capable citizens. When you realize, thinking about Telly, the villain of the film, kind of, is that life has given him nothing that interests him except for sex, drugs, and skateboards. His life is kind of a hell and is briefly interrupted by orgasms. That was from Roger Ebert, who wrote that on from the Chicago Sun-Times for his review for it. And in a way, it's kind of true, but at the same time, though, I could definitely see this movie having a polarizing opinion on it when it comes to this type of thing. But as far as my take on it, I have not seen this movie, unfortunately. It's one I've been kind of curious to check out just to see what is how I would feel about the controversy behind it. But yeah, it's just one that has never really been able to get. I've never been able to get the free time to actually want to see this movie, and in a way, I'm kind of afraid to do it, though. I feel like this is going to be one of those movies that is kind of like Schindler's List and 12 Years a Slave, where it could be a good movie, but it's going to be really hard to watch on a second viewing. Like, it's one of those movies that, because the subject matter is so heavy and so intense, it's one of those things where I have to really think about when's the right time to take a look at it, and do I have enough energy to actually get a chance to watch it and actually sit through it. But that's the controversy behind it, and like I said before, I haven't seen the film, so I can't really give my personal opinion on it, but I'm definitely curious to see one day if this movie is worth the controversy, or is it just what it's been said to be, exploitive and kind of on the line of child pornography. But so notable things about the movie, though, you do have the first appearances of such notable names like Chloe Sevigny is in here. She's done a lot with the writer Harmony Korine, who went on to write and directs such films as Gummo and Spring Breakers. Rosario Dawson, this is one of her first films. John Abrams, who you'd see in Scary Movie and Meet the Parents, is one of his early films. Other than that, though, that's just kind of my own take that I have to take because I haven't seen the film, so I can't really delve into what I really feel about it. But that was one of the more controversial films that came out at that time, and maybe it's for a good reason. So that is Kids. Let us move on to the last movie that we have here, which is An Awfully Big Adventure.
Let's take it off. It's a very heavy season, and you're all going to have to work very, very hard. But you're all the very best people we could find. Oh. For the money.
All Stella Bradshaw ever wanted
Mrs. Fairfield, shall I take a message?
was to be a great actress.
I hope she's not in for another disappointment.
Well, if she is, I've told her this time she'll end up behind the counter in Woolworths.
To be taken seriously.
I live here.
Of course you do. I think that's charming.
Most of all, to be loved.
You like to dance?
short of your lift home. Teacher, things come first. And start her off
When somebody loves you like that, make the most of it.
on an awfully big adventure.
I shall give her a card.
In a world of make-believe,
Why can't we stop?
she's about to discover
Meredith, that's his usual nonsense.
the difference between true love. Don't you love me just a bit?
They're made for each other.
And real life. A place of innocence.
I'm learning, Mother.
You can't see the truth. Give me make-believe. I prefer it.
Alan Rickman, Hugh Grant, and introducing Georgina Cates as Stella. From director Mike Newell, who brought you Enchanted April and Four Weddings and a Funeral. An awfully big adventure.
This was Mike Newell's follow-up to his breakthrough hit last year, Four Weddings and a Funeral. And it has Hugh Grant in here, who was in that movie, and it was just in 9 months. And like I said before, had that controversy going on at the time of this. So that this was another movie that had to deal with that. You have Alan Rickman in here, and the story is basically a teenage girl who joins a theater troupe in Liverpool during a winter production of Peter Pan. The play quickly turns into a dark metaphor for youth, and she becomes drawn into a web of sexual politics and intrigue. And this is another one I haven't seen before, but the casting of Alan Rickman and Hugh Grant together should be something that could make this very interesting. But I'm looking on here. It didn't do well at the box office, nor did it do well with critics, even though a lot of people praised the performances of Rickman and Grant. From what I'm seeing here, it's one of those movies where you follow up on such a groundbreaking hit the previous year, and then you follow it up with a movie with high expectations, and the movie just doesn't really have a whole lot there. And apparently this movie has some really bad marketing to it, because supposedly this is not how the movie actually looks in the end. Like, this trailer is selling it as like this uplifting romantic comedy type of thing, kind of similar to what Four Weddings and a Funeral ended up being, but apparently the movie is nothing like that from what I've seen from a couple of reviews on here. But I don't know. I mean, it definitely could be something interesting, but it could also be one of those things where you follow up a big success the year before, and then you have this movie where everybody is looking at you now and saying, okay, what's your next move? And you make a film that's not very good in the end, and this sounds like it's definitely that case. But yeah, overall, I really don't have any more to say about that one, because, again, I haven't seen it, so I can't really say anything about it, but it could go either way. So there you go. That's an awfully big adventure. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we'll wrap up July 1995 with 4 movies, including some notable films. Kevin Costner's uber expensive Waterworld, Sandra Bullock starring in The Net, Ray Liotta, Danny Glover, and Dennis Leary starring in Operation Dumbo Drop from Disney, and also Midnight Dancer. So 4 movies to look at overall, and we will delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.